this morning, talking to us from JT. Where are you from?
Arizona in the US.
Okay. Whereabouts?
Phoenix area, just outside of Phoenix.
I love Phoenix.
Yeah, I've been here for about 2 years. Lots of people like to complain about the heat, but man, I don't know if I could live anywhere else, to be honest. Like, it's going to be 100 today, and I'm totally fine with that.
Love it. I'd swap
So
anytime.
how's the steak? How's the
What'd you say?
steak in Arizona?
Oh, it's not bad. I still got to find a kind of a local butcher, but there's lots of farming out here. You wouldn't expect it. Like, some people think stuff just dies out here. Lots of farming, lots of cows, lots of everything. Yeah, but I definitely have to find a local butcher. So far, it's just, I do your standard meat and maybe buy some online, but yeah, sooner or later I gotta find.
Carnivore for?
I started loosely last September, so just over a year, and then I actually started. So I'm kind of like, I put carnivore and animal based in my bios because I'm a little bit of both. I'm definitely not as far animal based as like a Paul Saladino, but I'm not super strict carnivore. Like, I will have fruit from time to time. And I started pretty loose in September of last year, just to try it out. Basically meals. Like, my meals were carnivore, and then everything in between was, I would snack, I would eat other stuff. And then I started seeing really good results. I was like, all right, maybe I should like go a little stricter on this and see what happens. So that
Like, what kind of results did you see?
I just felt better. Like, I felt better and started losing weight. Right. So when I originally started, all right, hold on one second. Got to corral the kids real fast. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, kids don't care if dad's having a podcast.
No, not really. Which is, I think it's fine anyway.
Yeah, it is fine. It's hilarious. My house goes from a zoo to totally quiet.
Yeah, I think anyway, it's been a while for me since it was like a zoo. It's a while back.
All right. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem.
Yeah, so I originally started because are you guys familiar with Whole30?
No.
So Whole30 is basically a diet that was just built around eating whole foods, right? So you eat zero processed foods, you eat basically zero crap. Mostly it is fruits, vegetables, lean meats, chicken, lean ground beef, that kind of stuff. And I'd done it before, and I did it, and I lost some weight, but I didn't feel good. Like, I bloated every single time, and I'm like, I did it for 90 days, like zero variances whatsoever. And after 90 days, I was like, man, I don't feel good. Like, this is dumb. Like, I was actually like upset. I was like,
what kind of foods were you eating?
Fruits, vegetables, lots of chicken, ground turkey, some beef here and there, eggs. Like, that's it. Like, that is all I ate for 90 days straight.
That's kind of like the paleo diet.
Yeah. So
super low fat.
It's basically like, if it has any ingredients, then you don't eat it. Right. Yeah. So it's all stuff that you're, whole foods that you're eating. And when I finished, I was like, man, like, I don't feel good. Like, I eat and I bloat and I'm like, meh. I'm like, I just did 90 days of this. And I was actually like, I was kind of pissed off. I was like, this is dumb. Like, and so I went and put all the weight right back on. I was like, man, I'm just gonna eat whatever I want. And then my wife
How much weight?
It was about 15 pounds, right? So I was an athlete in college, and I competed in bodybuilding a little bit after that. So I was up probably about 30 pounds from where I would be more comfortable at. So it wasn't a ton of weight. Like, it wasn't like, a couple 100 pounds or something like that, but I didn't like where I was at.
Yeah.
And so doing that, I lost 15 or 20 pounds and then put it back on like within a month or two, just because I was like, well, this is dumb. I'm just going to go back to eating whatever the heck I want. And then my wife sent me Carnivore MD, Paul Saladino. She's like, all right, so he's a little kooky. Like, he's far out there with some stuff, but check it out. And from a physiological standpoint, I could get behind it. So I was like, all right, I'll try it. And the biggest thing is I just felt better. Like within the first week, just removing vegetables was the biggest one for me.
Mm-hmm.
I spent a lot of my life doing your standard bodybuilding, like chicken and rice, chicken and broccoli, like trying 7,000 different ways to get myself to eat green beans reheated. And just, man, as soon as I got rid of that and started feeling better, I was like, I'm sold.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the weight started dropping off. And then, it was just easier to stick to, because not only does the food taste good, but I just felt better. Like I've done diets in the past where I get results, but I don't feel good.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, is it really worth it? Like, yeah,
Or
cool.
sustainable.
I lost weight, but I don't feel good. So if I'm going to feel bad, I might as well eat food that I like. So yeah, that's kind of my long-winded carnivore story.
And you got how many kids in the house?
2. I have just turned 3 and I'm about to be 5.
Oh, you're right in the thick of it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So then that's the other thing is like, I work out at home. Like I don't, where we're at, we're in a pretty large area, but the nearest gym is 15 minutes away.
Yeah.
And when you factor gym and then childcare, because I have one kid that goes to, kind of school a couple days a week, but you factor in childcare and the time and all that, I'm like, man, I just can't swing it.
Yeah, it
So
adds up.
yeah, so I work out from home, which for most people is tough. Like that's hard for people to, focus when they're at home. But yeah, being able to work out at home and doing this, like I've gotten super good results from it.
So you went through actually quite a lifestyle change in a way. What did that how did that work? What effect did it have on your overall perspective on life and things?
I think the biggest one was how much. So I have a health and nutrition background. Like I have a bachelor's in sports medicine.
Mm-hmm.
I've done bodybuilding for a lot of years. I worked in the fitness industry for a number of years. So none of this is like new to me, but the biggest thing that was like eye opener was how many things that your diet can actually affect, right? Like I had some like acne issues, like not on my face or skin, but I would get acne along my hairlines, right? And for the longest time could never figure out why. I'm like, man, this is just, it's just one of those things. That the bloating, right? Like I just thought that was like life. I thought that was normal life. Like you eat and then you bloat, right? And we've made that so normal, right? Like you wear stretchy pants to Thanksgiving, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you expect after you eat to bloat and be like, oh man, I gotta go take a nap. So just a whole bunch of stuff like that I just thought was normal. Like even with a nutritional background, I never was like, man, maybe it's like food that's actually making me feel like that, and I shouldn't. And the big eye opener was actually my wife and I were in Vegas for our anniversary, and the whole time I just felt terrible. Like, and part of it, it's the food, right? But I was like, man, I feel terrible. Like I feel bloated. I'm just tired of this. And that was the biggest thing. Like I mentioned, that I first discovered was I can eat and not feel terrible afterwards. Like I can actually go through the day, because that's the big thing with bodybuilding, right? I don't know if you guys seen memes or jokes, but you wake up in the morning and you take your picture because that's the leanest that you're ever going to be, and then you take a sip of water and all of a sudden you bloat and you lose all your like leanness, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's just the cycle you go through, and you're like, hold on, I'll look good again in about 23 and a half hours. And so like eating this way and just being able to maintain like homeostasis, for lack of a better term, just throughout the day. Like I eat, I feel good, I go on with my day. I don't sit there and go, oh, hold on, give me a few minutes to digest. So that's been the biggest thing for me, I think. People talk about crazy energy. Oh, good.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to ask, what about, I don't want to interrupt you too much, sorry, but what about, what did you find anything difficult, in the process of changing over and then being much more limited in what you eat?
Not really, because that was common for me, right? So I was the guy that brought chicken and rice to, in a container to work, right?
Yes.
For the last, 10 years or so, that's been common. I've always brought my own food. So it wasn't super different for me to be the guy that always eats his own thing. I would have leniencies, obviously, but being on a strict diet, being the person that everybody's like, oh, he can't eat that, or oh, he's just hanging out here, but he can't eat anything here, was not new to me. So that was probably the other thing that was fairly easy for me. Is it was similar to what I was doing before. I was just readjusting my focus on what foods I was eating.
Do you drink alcohol?
On occasion. So I'll go through bouts, especially when I'm cutting, that I'll get rid of it completely and have no problems. Most of the alcohol I drink is either going to be like Scotch neat or some red wine. I'm not really a big beer guy, not really a mixer hard alcohol guy, but I do like Scotch, and so I'll have a glass every once in a while. It's not very often. I'd go through phases, right? Where all of a sudden my wife and I are like, yeah, we've had wine quite a few days in a row. Maybe we should like chill for a little bit, and then go 2 months without anything. So yeah, I will enjoy it on occasion, but it's not a typical part of my life.
So you started bodybuilding in college, high school?
So I was a college athlete. I played baseball in college. Got out, and then I think I did my first show physique when I was 26 or 27. So a few years after.
With a sports medicine, sports nutrition background. So what are you learning to eat for bodybuilding? Is it from the sports nutrition education, or was it from the bodybuilding community?
Mostly from the bodybuilding community, but for the most part, bodybuilding is based on just like old school nutrition, right? If you want to lose weight, start cutting out carbs, start cutting out crap food, start cutting out processed, eating a calorie deficit. The reason things like chicken and rice, chicken and broccoli are so popular is because you get more food with less calories because of lower fat content. So bodybuilding is actually, I think, for the average person, a lot of people could learn a lot from quote unquote bro science, right? Like what you read on Twitter, because for the most part, they have a pretty decent grasp on stop eating crap and you'll look better. Like that's the standard person can't get behind that. They can't get that through their head. But yeah, it was a little bit of my own, a little bit of trial and error, and then a little bit of just, people I was around, not only at work, but also in the industry.
Because like when I did the paleo diet, I was eating for performance in CrossFit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would, I wasn't intermittent fasting. I would eat protein breakfast, protein shakes, and then I would eat, piles of turkey and root vegetables. And just like you, I had inflammation everywhere. But I guess the point is, like, chicken and rice is a vastly different diet than hamburger and steak and eggs. Like I think to a lot of people who are maybe coming new into carnivore or bodybuilding, they would say, well, they're both healthy foods. It's not processed, but the difference in how your body feels on those different diets is incredible.
Yeah, and I would definitely agree, because there's a stigma against fat a lot, right? And that's probably the biggest one for me that's been overcoming, is when you talk to most people, it's like eat lower fat content foods because you're gonna have less calories, right? So that's where chicken comes in, because chicken is a lot less fat than beef or steak. And so
so they say eat chicken before steak.
Yeah, and it's not because of the nutritional difference. It's strictly a macro thing, right?
Yeah.
And that's probably the other one, is from a bodybuilding standpoint, it's all about macros. Like, some people are a little looser with it. They're like, yeah, sure, you can have Pop-Tarts as long as it fits your macros. Or that's a common term, right? If it fits your macros, you can eat whatever you want as long as it fits your macros. And from a physique and aesthetic standpoint, for the most part, that works, right? Like, I could eat any various number of things and still get the look that I want from an aesthetic standpoint.
Because you stick to the macros.
Yeah. And, there's obviously some other variances and some personal things that go into it. Everybody handles stuff differently, but that doesn't address how you feel, right? Like if I go out and eat, 2,000 calories and it's Pop-Tarts and some chicken, and then I sprinkle some sugar over the top of, whatever it is I'm eating, I'm not going to feel the same as if I sit down and have, 24 ounces of steak and go on with my day. And that was probably the biggest thing for me, is that relationship with how I feel based on what I eat, right? It's not just about macros, right? A lot of people have gotten really good results not even knowing what a macro is. But for me, it's more about like how I feel, like just being able to eat and not constantly worried about how bad I'm going to feel, or, any number of things. That's been the biggest,
that's
like,
true satiety. True satiety, I think, is how food makes you feel, where they often will say it's how full it makes you. But I like to think about it like you said, how good it makes me feel.
Yeah. And people I've realized, dealing with fitness and then dealing with social media, people have a lot of skewed ideas on a lot of stuff, right? People have weird, like, how did you come to this conclusion? And that's one of them, is when people are trying to especially lose weight, not enough people are talking about what it makes you feel, like not only from a physically but mentally, like how food can affect your, you mentally, and how all of that just steamrolls. And that's where I got my best results, was I felt better, which meant I then could work out more and harder because I felt better. And then because I was working out more and harder, I started seeing more results. And because I was seeing more results, I started feeling better mentally. And then it's just like, it just snowballed all the way down. And then all of a sudden I was like, man, this is easy. Like, how did I ever get off this? Right. Because there was a couple of years where I didn't really work out because I had a newborn baby. I was working a lot. My wife and I had opposite schedules, like, the standard, right? Life. And now it's like, man, I feel too good not to. Like, I take a rest day and I'm like, what am I going to do? Right.
Jason, do you have a how many times do you eat per day? Do you do time restricted eating? Did you cut out snacking? Do you do fasting? Anything like that?
Yes, but not strict. So to answer Lars, I'm 36. I'll be 37 in January. I am not very strict about the number of times I eat and the intermittent fasting windows I do, but it typically lends itself to a schedule, if that makes sense. And usually it depends on what I'm trying to do. So currently I'm working on cutting down again. And so based on how my workouts are and like my food intake and my workouts, I will typically go from about 6 o'clock at night to about 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning without eating. So almost 20 hours. And that's not a super strict, like I'm on a timer. That's just how it works. I've found that me eating after 6 o'clock, like I'm not really going to be, I'm going to have a huge steak. So, and I'm cutting out snacking, right? I don't really snack hardly at all. So it just lends itself to 6 o'clock being about the finish point. And then based on my workouts and when I can fit it in, 10 or 11 seems to be about the point where I eat. So it's not super strict. I'm not somebody that's like, nope, I have to wait till 11 o'clock on the dot. But the way I'm a pretty scheduled person. So the way my schedule works out, it ends up like that. As far as meals a day, that's another thing. If I'm trying to add weight and I'm trying to boost my calories, I'll add more meals, obviously. But I will typically be 2 full meals, and full meals being anywhere from 8 to 16 ounces of ground beef or steak. And then I will typically have something smaller after I work out. So 2.5 meals a day is about what I'm on. But I'm not super strict about that. There are some people which, they have on the timer, I can't eat until this time. That's just how it works. My body likes a routine. And so I end up pretty structured, but not from the standpoint that I'm like, no, I have to. And to answer snacking, I don't really snack at all. The little bit of variances I do towards animal based would be my wife and kids eat a lot of fruit. So I'll eat a little bit of fruit, and that would be my snacking. Mm-hmm. But I found a long time ago that if you're trying to avoid eating bad food, giving up snacking is the way to go. Like, that makes it super difficult to try and find snack options. So yeah, stick to eating at meals, avoid snacking, and then I just end up falling on an intermittent fasting schedule.
Yeah. Is your wife carnivore?
No, so she's close, but the differences would be she will eat like rice and potatoes. Right? Rice, potatoes, fruit. She'll eat that a lot more. I have not had rice or potatoes in a really long time. I will eat fruit, sometimes more than other. Right now, I'm not really eating a whole lot, but those would be the three main areas. She'll prioritize eggs, red meat, but then she'll also eat potatoes and rice and fruit.
And the kids?
So they are not. I know some people go back and forth with it. My goal with them is to try and get them the best food possible that they'll eat consistently.
That's a great point.
Do we go lenient with them? Yeah. I'm not trying to put them in a super low carb state. I don't think that they necessarily like need to eat a whole bunch. They don't eat vegetables. Like, I don't remember the last time I tried to get them to eat a vegetable. That helped me because they never wanted to anyway. So it was like trying to eat vegetables myself. I'm like, all right, how can we like fit in vegetables this time? So they don't eat vegetables. They do eat a decent amount of fruit. Still working on the meat aspect. My eldest likes steak a little bit more. My youngest is kind of hit and miss. But yeah, no, they're not on any type of strict regimen. I try to avoid as much processed foods as possible for them. They still do eat some on occasion, but no, they're not super strict on the carnivore. As they get older, I'll start to move towards something of that nature. But at this age, I want them to eat. I want them to, whatever they're going to eat consistently, as long as it's not, terrible crap, which most food is, but you get what I'm saying.
Jason, what when they start when they go to school in Arizona, do they get food in school, or do they bring their own, and how does that work? Because I'm not so familiar with.
That's a great question. I know they have a lunch period. So my oldest won't start like official school. Like, he's in like a charter preschool daycare kind of thing, right? Yes. Like, so a couple days a week he goes and we send him food. They don't have any kind of food there. Next year he'll actually start school, and then I know that they will have like lunches, but most of the time we're going to send him with food. Like, I'm not trying to have him sit there and eat off cafeteria food. I'm sure he will on occasion, but yeah, we'll try and prioritize sending him food as much as possible.
Yeah, with kids, it's been a real eye-opening experience feeding them, because I finally figured it out. If I evangelize steak in the right way, now my younger two children, because I have 2 teenagers and then 2 little ones, and the teenagers, they're eating chips and whatever they can get, Starbucks. Like, they're against my carnivore. But the 2 little ones, as an experiment, I took them off steak for a week, last week, 2 weeks ago. And I said, okay, we're going to eat how your older sister wants to do it. So, I made them a quesadilla. And my 4-year-old girl, after 3 days, she was like, I want steak. Because I'd been feeding her steak so regularly. And it kind of taught me like if we can make that, there's like if we can get like an anchor of steak set in their metabolism, and they get them really used to chewing those fats and that protein, I think the hormones take over, because you can't even feed her a hot dog now. She just, in her mind, if it's not steak, why am I eating meat? And I also noticed, the more protein you can get into them at the beginning of the day and throughout the day, the overall less garbage they eat later in the day. So it's a protein strategy. So I just load them up with protein at breakfast, in their lunch, and then but every day it's like, oh, it was pizza day, or so and so brought cupcakes. You can never keep it out from them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a struggle. And part of it is I don't want my kids to have like this idea that they can't, like they have to be outcast from all of their friends based on food choices, right? Obviously I don't want them eating a whole bunch of junk all the time, but the big thing that we've tried, like, so like my 5-year-old loves steak too, right? It's still hard for him to like just sit down and eat a whole bunch of steak, but we'll work it in. But his whole thing is he's like, Daddy loves steak, I love steak, it's gonna make me big and strong. I'm like,
yeah,
perfect. Like, so that's the main thing that we're trying to do with them. I know a lot of people are a lot stricter with their kids, but I also don't want, my kids to be the weird ones in school when they're like, that kid can't eat anything, right? And again, I'm not trying to like have them conform to, they go eat out a bunch of candy and cake and drink soda and all that kind of stuff, which is also super crazy for like doctors. They're like, how much juice did he drink? I don't drink juice at all. Buddy, hold on. Yeah, so like they drink exclusively water. My kids drink a ton of water, and doctors are always crazy about that. They're like, really? Like, no. I'm like, no, they don't drink juice. Like, they might have juice like once every couple of weeks, and that's like a huge deal.
Yeah, my kids don't do juice either.
Yeah, so that's the goal with them with food. And then as they get older, like, they can start like honing in on.
Are they lean?
Yeah. Both my kids are very active. They're very, and that's the other thing. Like, I don't want to speak ill of people who may have like overweight children, because I know there's more factors to it. But there will never be a point where I knowingly feed my kids junk and they're at a point where they're, borderline obese. Like, I think that is absolutely horrible for them. So yeah, my kids are both very lean, not very lean like bad, but no weight issues whatsoever. And I think that's super important for kids to grow up being able to do that, because you see some of the kids that are overweight and they honestly just can't even keep up with other kids. Like, they can't do some of the stuff. They can't run around and play on the playground because they're overweight.
Does anybody know the stats on childhood obesity right now? Because I especially noticed it last summer at the beach. And when I went to elementary school, like I started kindergarten in 85, 84, and we had one kid in our class who, looking back at pictures, he was just a little husky. And now it's like I'm seeing very obese children all of the time. Yeah. And there's kind of like a stigma. It's like, because they're kids. And I went through a little bit with some weight problems with my oldest daughter. And I remember when I brought it up, the hate I got back from all of the other female family members was like, don't you dare talk about her weight. And I was like, well, who's going to, right? Like, yeah. And then I see it with these kids on the beach, and it's like the greatest crime that no one talks about. You've
taboo.
Robbed them. It's taboo. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely brutal. And And it's obvious why they're doing it. Like you can see that I can spot a parent who uses carbohydrates as the, you know, the carrot and the stick. If they're parenting with a carrot and a stick mentality, and then they're constantly trying to load them up with food to get them to do what they want, and you know, boom, they're it's sad.
Yeah, Jason,
Yeah,
I think here in where I'm in Finland in Northern Europe, which is not too different from North America, and I think it's about a third of children are overweight or obese, and just like Lars said, when I was in school, which was a long time ago, there was like one fat kid in the school, and that's it, and nothing compared to today. So it's a huge problem, including also, of course, a lot of you know, we didn't really have type 2 diabetic children, didn't exist not even 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now you have type 2 diabetic children, and the problem is growing at a staggering rate. So in adults as well.
Yeah.
and I think one of the big issues that people fail to realize, and kind of what you were saying, Lars, is, you know, don't bring that up, don't talk about it, how dare you, you know, mention that, is aside from the host of physical issues, the psychological stuff, right? Like I'm a grown adult, right? I'm a grown man who can like handle my emotions, and I know how I feel 20 pounds heavier than what I am right now, 15 pounds heavier, right? So like there's no way that a kid, because everybody knows what you're supposed to look like, right? Supposed to look like, you can't avoid it.
Yeah.
And so having kids grow up that way, like, I don't know, I'm sure people have done studies on it, but the psychological stuff that goes in is just as bad. Like, and people need to understand that.
Yeah. And you're so right. Like that. And I noticed too, like a few times I've offered advice or coaching to an obese guy who wants to come into carnivore. And I kind of understood that the heavier they were, the longer the coaching process out of it to get them into carnivore, because that weight, it just sits on their conscience and in their mind. And you know, like I have a ton of empathy for obese people. And when I see them, and because, you know, in a way they just they drew the short stick. They were unlucky metabolically. Then they hit this perfect storm of cheap calories in the environment, and then maybe some parenting issues, and then they're eating, and this problem, it, you know, in a lot of, like, I've had problems in my life, and I'm not so sure that they've ever been as bad as what it would be like to be obese. We can't even imagine.
Yeah. Like like I said, I know what it's like when I'm 15 pounds heavier. And for me, like that's not good for me. Right. But I can't even imagine being 100 pounds, right? Like what that would do on my psyche. I just can't even put myself in those shoes.
No.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was 55, about 55 pounds heavier when I started out, and certainly changed my life to lose that. It went pretty quick. It took 3 months, and that's it.
Yeah. I was just blown away. Like I got very lean for what, like if I go under 160 into 158 territory, I'm 5'11". And I remember I was feeling the bones on my back all around my pelvis and stuff. Like it gives you different feedback on your body. But I just noticed when I get very lean, my speed, I'm so much faster. I feel explosive.
It helped.
Yeah, everything.
It helped out with the
Everything's better.
cycling, you know.
Everything's better.
Yeah,
It's
especially
true.
uphill cycling is great.
Right.
I promise.
Every pound makes a difference.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
was
and you
wondering
can
what the hell is going on, you know.
Yeah.
tell
Sprinting
people
uphill.
stats like that, like the amount of extra pressure that your knees hold for every pound that you're overweight. Like you can tell people these stats and they go, okay, yeah, man, that's crazy, and then nothing changes.
Mm.
And so that's also been a struggle, like especially on social media, like since starting this, right? Like so I started, the Carnivore JT page earlier this year.
Mhm.
And so obviously like a lot of like nutrition and diet stuff comes up. But a lot of the people that just don't understand like how negative that extra weight is. And a lot of times people aren't trying to be mean, like they're legit trying to help. Um, and everybody wants to be like inclusive and accepting. I'm like, I'm just like trying to be real. Like if you would lose 50 pounds, like everything in your life would be better. Like I've
Yeah.
literally never met a single person who has lost significant weight and things didn't get better.
No.
Like it's I mean, I'm sure somebody out there has, but if we're going to talk about like generalizations, like if you want one thing that can improve your life, like just do that. And I'll on Twitter especially, like I don't know if you guys follow my other socials, but I'm a lot more positive on my other socials for the most part.
I
Twitter,
find
I
your
like
social media to be quite positive and fun and jovial. I like it.
Yeah, me
I
too.
try, right?
Me too.
I
Very good.
poke fun at vegans, especially on Twitter or X or whatever we call it now. Um, and a lot of people like have preconceived notions and they want to fight. And I've said this before. I honestly don't care what your diet is. Like I don't. Just be healthy, right? Like if I would pick a healthy, it's sad that I have to equate that, a healthy vegan diet over a standard American diet or your typical Western diet any day of the week, right? If those are your choices, go vegan. Like I would tell somebody to go vegan because you're going to be healthier than eating a standard American diet. That's hard for people to understand. They're like, you're carnivore, you can't. I'm like, no, I just want people to stop eating crap. Like just stop eating processed foods. Now, do I think you're going to be a lot better if you go from vegan to more meat? Yes, obviously. But when I'm talking to people have preconceived notions because of my name. Like I just want people to stop eating the junk that they're eating. Like, and literally everything will be better. I don't care if you have to go vegan in order to do that, or
Yeah,
if you go
sure.
paleo, or if you go keto, or if you go animal based, like whatever it is, people get so tied up into the nuances of, am I allowed this tablespoon of onion powder? Like,
I think
like
excellent point.
you sprinkled some parsley on top of it. Like, is that okay? I'm like, bro, I'm making a video. Just chill. Like, just stop eating crap and like stick to something, and you'll see how much stuff improves, and then you can fine tune from there.
Yeah, exactly. No, true. The
But
crap has to go.
eating addiction. What's
Sorry.
that?
No, I just said, yeah, the crap food has to go. That's number one for sure. Sorry, Lars. Go ahead.
The argument that I'm having with my 16-year-old daughter these days. So I'm explaining. I say I only have a few non-negotiables in the house, and one of them is a 3 times a week fitness regime must be maintained. And we're at loggerheads over that now because I wasn't having success getting her to eat steak. And then her friends come over and they bring, like, the teenagers like to sit around on their phones and eat, and they like to eat garbage while they do it. So it's like I have these opposites in the house for my oldest daughter. And then I have my 4-year-old girl who's up out of bed at 6:45 on the dot every day, does not stop moving again till 7:15 at night. I put her in her bed and she's sleeping 2 minutes later, and it's just that same routine. And it's as I see diet and habits unfold with all my children and the variety of their ages, it's been giving me a new perspective on carnivore and how to how to get people to eat it, but I've really learned that, like, anybody who tells, oh, how do you like your steak done? Oh, medium, or like even on the well side of medium, that's just a clear indicator to me that they haven't eaten enough steak. Because if you eat enough steak, something in your hormones and your satiety just starts wanting it more rare. And I watched that with my 4-year-old. She started off, now she won't eat it unless it's red. She wants it rare and dripping and red because she's had enough now.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I was actually going to take that to a question back to your sports nutrition. So you've got multiple years at school in nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I got to ask you this. What are they teaching?
So honestly, like, so I have a decent amount from the nutrition. It's not, sports medicine is a pretty wide range. But honestly, so when you take the majority of your classes, unless you start getting to high level, like dietitian and that kind of stuff, most of it is just how the body works on like an intake output type thing, right? It's like, hey, what happens if you eat carbohydrates? Like, what's the process that your body goes through? What is, yeah, I honestly don't ever remember learning in school from either sorry about that. I honestly don't ever remember being taught, other than like a food pyramid, of, hey, this is the type of foods that you should eat, right? Like there was your standard, right? If you have an athletic event, carb up X number of hours before, and then eat little bits here, and then that. So like some for performance, but it's been a few years since I've been in school, but I never remember somebody saying, hey, this is why you should eat chicken over turkey, or this is why you should eat beef over chicken, or this is why you should have rice instead of this, or I don't ever remember being taught any of that. Like, and I have a big nutrition book. Most of it is just, hey, what happens on a cellular level when you eat something, or how do carbs help performance? How does your body break it down and utilize energy, and how do calories going in and how do calories going out? And there's none of this, like, I call it like common sense nutrition. Like, hey, this is what's going to happen if you eat a whole bunch of processed foods, right? These are the inflammatory processes that your body's going to go through. This is like your gut microbiome that's going to be damaged. This is, studies that show this, that. None of that. I don't ever remember any of that, which is crazy to me. Like, I mean, I figured that out from a personal experience standpoint, right? Hey, if I eat a whole bunch of Oreos and then try and go work out, I'm not going to feel very good. But if I eat some steak and then go work out, I'll feel fine. But it's not taught that way. It's like, it's almost like we're trying to be too smart and teach people so much that we just miss the basics. Like,
overcomplication
for the longest time. Yeah. And for the longest time, when people ask me, and it's kind of a snarky response, but I tell people, stop eating like an asshole. Yeah. Like, that's the number one thing. And they're like, well, no. Like, specifically, I'm like, no, stop. Like, if you can't do that, you're trying to, like, people will ask me, well, how many calories do you eat? Like, what are your macros? What is your timing? What is this? I'm like, if you can't put the donut down, or if you can't, like, not drink a liter of Coke every day, like, you're trying to run a marathon before you can even, like, get out of bed. And I think that's a huge part with nutrition is, everybody's like, show me the study, or show me this, or I saw a study that I'm like, no, you can't even control, like, what you put in your mouth. Like, that's step one. Like, step one, you got to be able to control what you put in your mouth, and then you can start worrying about, like, the nuances of whether 4 grams of fiber is better than 5 grams of fiber, or, like, people get so crazy with it. And part of that, I think, is the education, right? We get so dietitians out there like putting all kinds of like formulas and turning this into a chemistry experiment while touting that you eat mac and cheese and that's okay.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah, it's nuts.
mind blowing.
I think that many dietitians probably just provide good excuses for the people, right? So like you said, demanding the studies and talking about 4 grams of whatever is just a cop out. It's just an excuse.
But
And
at the same time, I haven't read any studies that, like, I'm not a big science guy. I kind of left the need for confirmation in the carnivore diet a long time ago, but I do find myself sometimes wondering, like, where's the scientific study that explains the overall hormonal benefits of eating, 500 or 600 pounds of high quality steak in a year? Because, like, something I learned on the carnivore diet was something very incredible happens when you restrict your food to just a few different foods, steak, butter, salt, for example, and then just stack that up fundamentally, like, day after day after day. And I looked at, maybe you can mention or talk about this. You know how on some of the ingredient lists, they'll give you the percentage of daily required nutrients that it contains. And then sometimes I'll look at that and I'll be like, oh, what is that? So they're taking, okay, well, we need X amount of creatine for a day or something like that. And this is the percentage that you get it from. But when you're eating on the carnivore diet, you're on a lot of the nutrients, you're getting 10 times more than the experts would recommend to you. And then back to that earlier point, like, after you've eaten hundreds of pounds of steak in that window and you're sitting there as lean as you've ever been, your fingernails are thicker, your hair is thicker, your skin feels like silk, yet it's smooth and resilient. It doesn't, like, my skin, it didn't even get injured in the same way after I was on carnivore. And I'm kind of, I would say Huberman's my favorite online scientist, but nobody has really, I don't think that they've touched into the true hormonal benefits of doing it, because what I feel has just been, and what others feel has just been so much larger and grander than any of the science tells us is even possible.
And I think part of it is we're so limited on what we can actually study from a nutritional standpoint. Like, that's part of why I hate most nutritional studies is even if you take out like who paid for it and what the bias is and the agenda is, most nutritional studies are going to be some type of observational study that requires some sort of voluntary self-reporting.
Yes.
Oh,
right. Because the only way to not do that is to have somebody hooked up in a lab 24/7, which you can't. Right. So if you look at most studies, it's going to be based on what participants self-reported, which is a huge issue, because how many times have you heard somebody who's 50 pounds overweight go, I eat pretty good? No, you don't. Like, you have no idea what you're putting in. And then you actually make somebody write down what they're eating, and then they're like, whoa, like, really? So that's huge problem number one for me. And number two is all of these observational studies, it's the correlation is not causation, right? They will pick out one thing, like meat studies. And I'll tell every single person who brings up a meat study, not one of those can actually isolate meat, because what you do is you tell somebody who eats a standard American diet to stop eating meat, which means you stop eating fried chicken, you stop eating burgers and fries, and you stop eating all of this other garbage. And then they get healthy, and then they go back and go, well, meat's the cause.
yeah.
And like the scope that they have available for doing nutritional studies, in my opinion, is so small that when people come up with studies, well, studies show that it's going to get better.
But that study, you're saying that study is so small and limited.
Yeah. And then people want to discount anecdotal evidence, which I'm like, that's literally what all nutritional studies are. It's just a collection of anecdotal evidence. Anecdotal evidence, my personal experience. But that's all studies are. It's like, hey, there's, go look at the Advent studies for veganism. 50,000 people. Guess what? It's all a bunch of anecdotal evidence for 50,000 people. Like all it is you just compiled it into a study and then published it.
True.
And so nutritional studies is a tough one for me because, and it's a limitation of just not being able to isolate everything in the body. Like we're just so complex, but they will try and take little changes and say that is the reason. Like red meat causes cancer. Well, we studied, 20,000 people, and in 15,000 people who ate more red meat, they had a higher incidence of colon cancer. So meat causes cancer. And you're like, you can't that doesn't work because you don't know what else they're eating, right? And so that is a big issue with nutritional studies, like cholesterol studies, right? There are, cholesterol studies that come out and say LDL is the number one driver of heart disease. And you go, okay, but if you have good triglyceride and HDL ratios and you're in good cardiovascular fitness, you have super low issues with cardiovascular health or disease.
Yeah.
And so it's like, it's the fact that you can have all these conflicting, right? I can go on and find a doctor that says you don't need more than 35 grams of protein. Right? Dude's got a PhD, like a medical degree, and will say you don't need more than 35 grams of protein. And it's like, if I can find two conflicting, like polar opposite results from a nutritional study, then in my mind, that means there's an issue as a whole with blindly believing nutritional studies. And so I think they're a tool. I think you can use nutritional studies to better understand your health, but the people that just post articles from PubMed all day long, I'm like, you don't even understand what you're posting. Like some of these are in rats and some of these are in specific groups of people. And it's just, there's just a lot. And so for people to discount personal experiences from other people and back them up with, these outdated, shoddy research studies is probably the biggest struggle to get people to go carnivore, because you have this stigma, right? You walk down the street and ask 50 people, if I eat, 700 pounds of beef, what's going to happen? And probably 40 of them will go, you're going to die, bro. No idea why, but that's what they've been told, right? It used to be commercials are beef, it's what's for dinner. And now it's like, don't eat that. Right. The last study I saw was, I think, something out of the UK, and if they're like, it was in grams, so I'm trying to translate to my American ounces, but it was something like if you eat 8 ounces of red meat a week, your incidence for cancer goes up 50%. How do you even get that? Now you're asking everybody to weigh their food. Are you telling you that every single one of your participants weighed their food?
But then
I promise you they didn't.
At the same time, and I was guilty of this too, unless you've spent a little bit of time imagining for the vast human history, we're just eating animals because that's the most efficient, easiest way to get our nutrients. And we've the modern distribution and how we distribute all this food, we are so detached from primal eating, which primal eating also had primal fasting in it from time to time. And it's just the nature of the beast and geography and finding things. And people just, it's like, if you were to believe the science that they're writing, it's that humans could never have existed without modern distribution. It's just asinine and I see a lot of these. I can't even argue some of the things they post because I just check out immediately. It just doesn't line up with what the human experience has been on Earth for the 2 million years before we had highways to cart all the food around.
Yeah, that's I call it common sense nutrition. Like everybody wants to get super technical,
Yeah.
but I will have somebody, right, and in a lot of what you said, and a lot of other people's stories, I'm like, okay, so you're telling me that literally everything gets better, right? Like I lose weight, which is shown to be beneficial, gain muscle, which is shown to be beneficial. Skin conditions clear up, like inflammatory issues clear up, like I sleep
Digestion.
better, I have more energy, like that, just like all of this stuff gets better. Literally every single marker that if you went to somebody and said, hey, how are you feeling? Like mental gets better. But you can find an arbitrary number on a piece of paper that says, nope, your diet's going to kill you. I'm like, that's not common sense. Like,
No.
any other normal person without, if they didn't have Google, would go, I'm feeling better, I'm looking better, everything about this is better, this is good. And every doctor will tell you, listen to your body, go to see an orthopedic surgeon, and they'll say, listen to your body. If it hurts, something's wrong. If you feel good, you're doing something right, but not nutrition, right? It's like, oh, but you're not going to find that out for another 30 years. Just wait. Just wait. You know, it's there's just so much out there. It's good, the age of information, right? Everybody has access to it, but it's also dangerous because now every single person can look up every single study and then they just run with it. So I have my fun on Twitter with it, but for the most part, it's
I think a lot of
people who bring
the
up nutritional studies.
a lot of the people who argue against the common sense are people who are speculating about things and they're trying to defend their position, which is to keep eating crap and do nothing. Because if they tried carnivore, ketogenic, whatever, something more healthy than what they do, they'd find so many markers improving and feeling so much better that they definitely wouldn't argue. And I'm just saying it on the basis, of course, my basis is my own experience of reversing type 2 diabetes and getting rid of blood pressure medication and lots of other stuff. That's not trivial, but still a doctor will tell you, yeah, but you're not eating right. It's dangerous what you're doing, although you've reversed all these incredibly high risk chronic illnesses. You should go back to eating the way you did, which gave you the thing in the first place. It's completely crazy.
Yeah, and that's a great point. Like, and that's why I wish studies were only posted for absolute risk, right? Like, so the difference between relative risk and absolute risk.
Yeah.
Because people will go, your incidence of cancer goes up 20%. I'm like, cool, it goes from 4 to 4.4 or 4.8%. Like, so what you're telling me is I should get all of these markers, right? Be on the medication, be on the blood pressure meds, be on the statins, be on all this, and then so that my risk of cancer can go from 5% to 4%.
Yeah, and there is no absolute significant change in the risk, in the hazard ratio at all. And the other thing I think is also it should be in huge letters on top of every study, whether is it showing a causation, or is it a cause and effect, or is it association, what it shows, because that seems to confuse the hell out of people and everybody thinks association is causation because that's how it's marketed.
No, for sure. And that's like nutritional studies are marketed just like anything else. Like,
yes, yeah.
We need a cheat sheet because a lot of the stuff you're telling me, JT, you obviously have more of an educated science background than I have. And when I hear you talk about some of these scientific terms and how the science is used within the nutritional community to push agenda and to obfuscate true reality, it's kind of I mean, a lot of this is new terms. We need a cheat sheet to debunk these goddamn carbohydrate dealers.
Yeah, it's everybody will spin, like everybody's selling something, right? Like, even if you aren't actually like, say, hey, give me money for a product, you're still trying to sell something.
Sure.
And people that are doing research are trying to sell their research, right? And so like they're written that way, they're presented that way. And quite often people will just take a news article, right? They take a news article that headlines this, and then they don't even look at the study. which is linked somewhere in there, but they don't look at the study to see what the study actually said and if that's actually like a representation. And the big one is that absolute risk versus, relative, when they say you're 50% more likely to get cancer. I'm like, okay, so if you're telling me my chances are, 20 out of 1,000 people get cancer doing this, and my risk goes up to 30, like I've got greater risk of dying from a drunk driving accident. Like,
yeah, you've got a greater risk of getting a heart attack from winning the lottery. And
yeah, right. Like, so there's all of these things. I'm like, I don't care if it goes up 100%, if it's from 1% to 2%. Like, that's not significant.
Yeah.
Now, if it goes from 50% to 75%, okay, maybe we can talk about that.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's not. It's everything's structured so it's that selling appeal.
What do you think, Jason? What kind of do you have any? I know maybe we don't like to give people advice, but do you have any good advice to give to people if they are considering embarking on a journey of changing their dietary habits?
So I did a video a few weeks ago that had my top 3 tips for it.
Yes.
Number 1 is people don't have to go cold turkey, right? And so I use the analogy of somebody going to the gym for the first time, like maybe ever, and they sign up for the gym and they hire a personal trainer, and the personal trainer just absolutely beats the crap out of them, right? And they can't walk for a week, and then they never go back to the gym, right? And so they never go back to the gym, and they're like, this is dumb, I'm not doing this anymore. Like, did you actually help that person? No. Like, some people need that, right? Some people need to just go cold turkey, just go all in. But these people that are like, yeah, I had like keto flu and I felt terrible, and after a week I was like, this is not going to happen. So my suggestion to everybody is like, don't be afraid to like start small. Like, first, just cut out all your processed foods. Second, then start prioritizing meat, and then like start to like work everything down and give your body a chance to adapt to it. Another one is like, always have a plan, right? You should always have an idea of where your next meal's coming, whether it's what you're eating or what you're going to cook, because there's no quicker way to fall off a wagon than
that's a great one.
Man, I am starving and I have no meat defrosted. I have no like anything. And then you go, all right, that mac and cheese doesn't look too bad. Like, I'll just eat it once.
Yeah, you run to the grocery store when you're hungry, but to get to the meat section, you have to go through an absolute gauntlet of sugar.
Yeah, and so those are the 2 main ones for me. Is don't be afraid to like start easy, and work your way into it, and then have a plan. Like, because if you don't, you're gonna fail. Like, there's nobody out there that is going to consistently like not have food available and still be able to stick to a diet. And then I think the last one was, don't get wrapped up in the dogma of it. And I found that a lot because I skirt the line with carnivore and animal based, but some people will comment on my videos and be like, can I use garlic powder? Like, is that okay on carnivore? I'm like, you have a lot more problems to worry about rather than whether you're using garlic powder right now. Like, there's just people want to get so like, it's almost like it's like death by overanalyzation, right?
Yeah.
So they're like, I'm going to overanalyze this diet so much, but not actually do any of it.
You can tell they're going to fail based on the I get a good sense of it. If they're messaging me, a whole bunch of questions about some of these really finer points, I go, hey, look, stop. I go, the goal this month is to eat 50 pounds of steak and as little else as we can. And in a month, we'll start adding back in things that you feel are important to your lifestyle. But let's get the information from the 50 pounds of steak first.
Yeah, and that's
great.
People don't like the answers I get. I used to have, hey, can you write me a meal plan? And I go, cool. I would call it the 2 ingredient. I was like, if it has more than 2 ingredients on the label, don't eat it. They'd be like, well, but like what do you? I'm like, that's it.
Yeah, it's too simple,
like,
right?
Recipes. I'm like, no, just do that, and then we can talk about the nuances of it. Like, you want to talk to me about whether like sprinkling some herbs is going to have like a negative effect while you go out and eat Oreos and drink Starbucks. Like you're trying to, like, again, that marathon, like you're trying to run a marathon when you can't even get out of bed. Like, focus on this. And then if like, hey, I've been carnivore 6 months, still having some issues, but I do garlic powder. Okay, like now we can talk about that. And let's take a look at whether maybe that's causing an issue.
I think there's, or don't you think that there is some convenience in the complexity that we are, some people are trying to make this quite complex so that they can do their business, whether it's nutritionists or ladies magazines or food companies or whatever. Kind of one thing, and the other thing is that it's taken on board with gratitude, because if it's complicated, maybe it's difficult enough that I have an excuse for not quite getting there. So
yeah, no, and that's 100% true. Is people, the individual, make it more complicated than it is, so that when they inevitably fail, you have that scapegoat, right?
Exactly.
And the people selling it are going to make it more complicated so that you have to come to me for help, and then I can sell you whatever. And that's why I think it's funny when people talk about selling stuff on Carnivore. A guy is trying to sell supplements. I'm like, actually 90% of any carnivore influencer is going to tell you don't take supplements. But if you do, here are some issues, like here's some things, right? And so I'm like, man, just look at that's probably my biggest issue with keto. I don't necessarily have an issue with keto, but keto has gotten to the point where they're like trying to skirt the lines, right? They're like, you can't eat dessert, but you can eat this keto dessert. I'm like, yeah, just look at that.
When I see keto snacks in the winners checkout, I'm like, I don't know if this is keto. I'm going out on a limb here.
If people actually did keto, they'd have good results. But again, it's that, like, how
you
much
can have absolutely phenomenal results, but it's probably best if you don't focus on the keto desserts.
And people are like, oh, I got this keto pasta and then this keto bread and then this, and I'm like, that's fine, but like you just ate like 75 ingredients right there. Like, at some point you have to look at a nutrition label and go, nah, it might have too many ingredients for me. Like, I should probably stay away from that.
Great points.
So JT, you also do is it graphic tees or?
Yep. So
is this your side hustle or? Oh, look at that.
So I like I still really haven't promoted it much. It would be considered like a side hustle, but honestly, I made some for me to wear. And then I was like, well, I'm going to offer them. And then, if there's ever a situation where something goes crazy viral and people want to buy a whole bunch, cool. But honestly, like, it's a lot of it is stuff that I'll, think of and make and put it in a video or something. But it's all on demand, shipping and printing. So it's a company that I don't have to stock any inventory. I just make my designs, put it up there. When people order it, they print it out and ship it. So it's super easy. There's no risk to me at all because I'm not, housing inventory or anything. And it's, it's a fun way for some people to have, they're a little inflammatory. I'll admit it. Like they poke a little bit.
Fun.
But it's just a fun way to express carnivore-ish.
Jason, if you just DM me the your links, and we'll put them in the video as well.
Perfect. I will do that.
So what's ahead for you over the next? What are your nutritional goals over the next year, or your physique goals? Where are you trying to get to with carnivore?
So I got down to 180 pounds. So I put weight because that's a target for me, but that's something that, like, I know works for me. I try to keep people out of like weight targets when they aren't really experienced with it, but like this is something that, like, fluctuating weights is like second nature to me. So for lack of a better metric, I got down to 180 pounds when I did like my transformation thing. And then started putting weight back on intentionally and got up to about 205. And I'm currently at about 200 pounds. The goal was to get back to down to 180, but I think I've put on a decent amount of muscle, so I don't know if that's necessarily plausible. But the goal is to get to a similar body fat that I was before, to compare and contrast how the bulk went, basically. That will probably look at about like 190 pounds. So I probably got about 10 pounds to go. So that's the goal. And then honestly is to probably just, that's a weight that I can maintain, where I'm pretty lean, but it's not negatively affecting me lean. When you start getting super lean, like it starts to mess with you mentally, because you're usually, well, typically you have to be on such a calorie restriction in order to get that, or you have to start, manipulating certain factors of your diet. So that's super lean. Like that's like I'm 3 or 4 weeks out from a bodybuilding show. Like I'm doing copious amounts of cardio and very strict and never touching anything. And
what kind of body fat percentage is that?
So that's the other thing that's like super skewed. People will be like, I'm 3% body fat. I'm like, no, you're not.
Yeah.
At 180 right now, I'd probably be about 6 or 7%, maybe about 8%.
Yeah.
And it's just that low. It gets uncomfortable after a while.
Yes.
And so, yeah, I'm not really looking to hang out there. Some people do, and that's fine. But 190 is probably about where I'll shoot for and shoot to stay. And that's still pretty lean. Like lean for me is being able to see visible abs and vascularity. And so if I have that, like I'm fine. So that's the goal over the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then probably just maintain from there. Maybe try and do, add on a little bit more weight, but nothing crazy with it. That's honestly, it's hard, like doing carnivore, to add weight, because the vast majority of time you're going to add weight is carbs, right? And so that's when you're eating 300-400 grams of carbs, because that's the easiest way. Eating 5,000 calories of red meat is tough. Like I don't like red meat, but like that's like, okay, we're good. Like, so I probably won't do that again. I may experiment with. I was about 4,500.
How many pounds is that? I do everything in pounds now.
I was doing about 2.5 pounds of red meat, in addition to like a bunch of eggs and Greek yogurt and bacon. And I was like,
the other night
I've had one day, Jason, I've had one day where I had 4,500 calories of just meat and eggs. Holy cow.
Yeah, like you can do it if you have like a really big steak in the morning and a really big steak in the evening.
So,
but like consistently doing it, I was just like,
I
don't want to eat anymore.
After I broke my, I was eating pork day after day, and then I broke with steak, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to eat as much steak as I can. And sometimes I'll do that. And I was about halfway through my second steak, and it was just like within the span of 2 bites, I went from this is amazing to I'm done. Get this away from me. I'm finished. It's whatever that, like, we have so many hormones coursing through our body that are tied into food, sleep, weather. And I love to toy with them and see if I can sometimes parse out a new hormonal reaction that always surprises me. And that was the latest one. When you've gone 1 bite past your full limit with steak, it's a different feeling of fullness. It's just like your mouth won't even chew it anymore. It's like you couldn't force it.
Yeah, it's over.
It's over. Well, that's great. I'm glad we got to talk to somebody with a nutritional background to hear about some of these studies. And I wish somebody was debunking them more on a macro level, on a broad-based level. Say, look, this is an anecdotal, rather than, sometimes I find that everybody's just debating the science around it. And I just look at it and I'm like, instinctually, I reject the entire presupposition of the argument to begin with. So
Yes.
yeah. Oh, we lost you there. We can't hear you.
Oh, I moved. All right. Last point before I got to hop off. There was, anytime people bring up nutritional studies, you can look this up. There is a study that they did out of Chicago where white men who exercise more than 5 days a week, I think it was 4 days a week, more than 4 days a week, are 70% more likely to die early than black men. That's a real study. And I'm like, hold on. Like, there's just stuff like that where I'm like, there's one where they did it in rats, where Coca-Cola raised the testosterone levels of rats. And you're like, you're literally, it was, the article was like, Coca-Cola raises testosterone.
Yeah.
That's not how this works. Like, that's not. So yeah, it's, you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Like I said, common sense is where you got to like try and at least have a lens of nutrition, and then you can try and sift through the nutritional studies, but you can get lost. Like, if I spend 2 hours on PubMed, I'll come out like trying to eat Diet Coke and be vegan, and like, just, yeah, you're just going to end up all over the place.
Exactly.
Well, that was great. JT, it was lovely to have you on.
I appreciate you guys having me.
And we wish you the best with your family and your nutritional goals, and keep eating steak, bro.
Yeah.
All right, man. All right. See you guys.
See you.
All right.
Bye, guys.